Hello and welcome to another episode of the Legal & General Just Covered podcast, where we talk to advisors and other key stakeholders in the intermediary space. And today we've got a different episode and we've got a Legal & General employee with us as well as an esteemed guest. My name is Wayne Holcomb.
And I'm Hazel Johnston, and we are really excited, as Wayne said, to be joined by Steph, who's the new Chief Executive of the Association of Mortgage Intermediaries. So Steph, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
We're also joined by Vikki Jefferies, who's our
Welcome,
very
Vikki.
own Market Development Director. So Vikki, great to have you on. And again, fairly new to Legal & General, if we can still say that.
I think so. I think we can still play the new girl card for a while, don't you?
We can, exactly. I definitely did when I joined. So it's great to have you both on. And I think this episode will be packed full of amazing insights for our mortgage colleagues and I guess anybody who's looking to get a bit of an insight into that mortgage industry. So even if they're in financial advice and want to know a little bit about what's going on, I think this will be absolutely packed with information for them, won't it, Wayne?
Yeah, we're looking forward to this one.
So in terms of yourself, Steph, obviously you're a couple of weeks in now into your new role with Amy. So tell us a little bit about how it's going and what you see firsthand in the mortgage market at the moment.
Thank you. So yes, I am week 3. So I've moved into weeks rather than days. So I always think that's a good step, isn't it? And it is a change from my previous, it's a change from my previous role. So historically, I've worked in distribution, which is where I know Vikki. We were sort of, we were just saying actually to be sat next to each other actually is really
we were competitors.
We were competitors,
before.
friendly competitors.
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
But competitors before. So it's a really nice change. Amy has been on a fantastic journey and I'm stepping into some really big shoes. Robert Sinclair is leaving Amy in a fantastic place. But we are, the market's evolving. The regulator is, active. I think it's probably the best one. We'll get into some of that in a moment. Active in, increasing regulation and simplification. And we've got stuff coming down from government as well. So, but at a slightly more positive market. So that you put all of that together and actually it's just the right place for a little bit of evolution. And I think, a new chief exec is, at the helm to lead that through.
Yeah, and I think you're perfectly poised to bring us forward for the future. The energy that you've got, the connections and what you're bringing so far is absolutely fantastic. So thank you for coming on. I'm just interested, just taking it back a bit. How do you get to where you've got to at the moment? Give us a bit of a potted history of how you've got to where you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will give you a potted history. So I fell into financial services, probably like most. Yeah. I think, I didn't leave school planning to do that. I actually left school planning to go into medicine. And I took a year out and my aunt and my mum and other family all worked for the local assurance, got Abbey Life Assurance, which was sort of the big corporate in our town. And they were like, get a job here and, do that for a few months, save up a bit of money, do a bit of traveling, and then you can go to uni and carry on. And funny enough, I never went to university. And I did a whole host of sort of mortgage and protection sort of roles, did a little bit of time as an advisor in a branch. And then got my first role in intermediary distribution with a local network down on the south coast called Mortgage Intelligence. You've probably heard of them. And I did 15 and a half years there. And I think, people say, why did you stay for so long? And I think there was a couple of things. One, just, I had my family while I was there. So that you take a little bit of time out for that. But also just the market. You think back to 2001, sort of pre-regulation, just, it's a completely different marketplace to where it is today. And we saw that business move to, set up a mortgage network and then, acquire networks and become part of Countrywide, Connells. So there was such change and my role just adapted and evolved as I was there. I didn't need to move anywhere else to get a new challenge and to move up and move into other things. But there did come a time where I decided to move on and I moved on to Sesame Bancorp Group and I was there 8 years. Again, a whole host of roles were very much focused around proposition and partnerships, working very much with lender and provider partners, operating that mortgage and protection space, but focused on what do advisors need? How do we help them run their businesses, grow their businesses? So very much sort of advisor-centric in everything that I did. Worked closely with Amy as well, so part of industry contract groups. Vikki and I worked as part of that, work as part of the initiatives that Amy runs, and I'd love to touch into some of those as we go through the podcast. And that sort of brought me to, knowing Robert really, really well, knowing Andrew Montlake, the chair of the board, really well. And then Robert stood up at the Amy dinner last year and announced he was retiring and was looking for somebody else. And when the job description came through, I thought, hey, I don't tick half those boxes, but I'm going to do something really uncharacteristic for women, which is I'm going to put myself forward for that. And I'll have a conversation and see where it goes. Never expecting for one moment that I would be sat here today.
Well, but you're so glad you did, and congratulations.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
We haven't said that yet, but yeah, congratulations.
Thank you
And
very much.
as Wayne said, I think with the experience you've clearly got, I mean, what an exciting time for Amy. And Vikki, as someone who's probably worked with Amy and some of your guys throughout the years, what does it mean to you, and how have they supported advisors along the way, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Steph is perfect for Amy. And I think you won't mind me saying, but it was always a real challenge thinking about how does Amy replace Robert, I think was a big thing. But I think what you bring is something completely different and new to the table. It's like a new chapter for Amy. And I think Amy is so important for network. So if you're an advisor listening, for example, you might think, oh, I've heard of Amy, but I'm not sure what they do. But actually they are key and integral to helping networks navigate all the different challenges that we face in distribution. So whether that be regulatory, which naturally people do think, oh, Amy, help me with my regulatory issues. It's far more than that. It's almost like a council, peer-to-peer network, really confidential, safe space where distribution can sort of engage with, with competitors, but also sharing common problems. And actually, collectively, Amy brings about fundamental changes for the market that helps lenders, providers, distribution, and then, of course, like the end advisor and the principals that are in very small firms up to very large firms as well. And I think it's such an important industry body that is probably not recognised for the full scope of benefits that it brings. Certainly everybody signed up and sort of on the same page. And I think some of the interesting things in terms of research and, that real thought leadership that comes out of Amy is so, so useful with its independent status. Of course, it makes a real difference.
It's championing of advice, isn't it? It's championing of the advisor. That's what it's there for, whether it's from a big network down to the one man, one woman band, one person band, doing it in the back bedroom or whatever. They're championing that advisor, and what's championing the customer as well.
Yeah,
whether it be lobbying, wouldn't it? Would it be,
totally.
All the people coming in, the providers involved as well.
And I think, Vikki just done fantastic. So thank you very much, Vikki, for doing that sales job for me. That's superb. But I think Vicki's right. I think also what you see is what Amy can do, but there's so much behind the scenes. And I think you might think even just the interaction that we had, and we were quite sort of involved with Amy in some of the initiatives they're working on, and as Vikki said, some of those internal conversations, but actually there's a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes. And actually sometimes it's just, to your point there, Wayne, around just repositioning back with those key stakeholders, why advice is so important, why advisors are so important to this sector, both now and in the future. And, reading through all of that policy, and I've got a fantastic expert team who just eat policy like that for breakfast. They're just fantastic. And they're always looking at what are the unintended consequences of this? What are the things that could play out? What are the things that we need to look at for advice and consumers that maybe people just haven't realised because they have not had the depth of understanding of how the sector works?
Well, they haven't got the time to think about the implications and the how. And that's a big thing. I went to the Amy dinner last year. It's the first one I'd ever actually been to. And I was just astounded by, firstly, your team that eats that regulatory content for breakfast and all of that, and how many people you've got in the background doing that, but also where they're looking at the output, if you like, and portraying how an advisor is going to work with any regulatory change that comes along, or whether it's any industry change or anything in that regard. So, the importance of the advisor, but then the importance of the Amy themselves is absolutely huge.
When I was an advisor, I was very much in a corporate world. I worked for a building society, so I was very protected. And, they wrote all of our regulation script, all these call checks. And I always think that, now in my position looking at advisors, that I think I had 8 weeks of training. I then had guidance every single day from a line manager. For these people that go off and do it themselves, hats off to any intermediary out there who's got to try and balance all of the juggling of running a business, being an advisor, being there for your clients, and keeping abreast of, let's be honest, in financial services, the only thing, it's cliche, but the only thing constant is the change of
so
things going on.
Really true.
And I think that's where, people like Amy are essential, isn't it, to providing that great advice.
And Amy collaborates so much. And I know there's been some really opportunities of our organisation, in general, collaborating with with Amy. Vikki, you've been involved in a lot of that. Are you allowed to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, so L&G have sponsored Viewpoint, which is the protection research, for several years. And prior to me joining L&G last year, I sat on the other side and used that research in distribution. Yeah. So there's a lot of value in that. I think why Viewpoint is really unique is because the research actually takes a customer's perspective, a broker's perspective, and then the market overall. So actually what it gives advisors is real tangible understanding of what that customer conversation is likely to be like, how brokers are applying that, and where the opportunities are to grow the market. And you know, every year the stats that come out that it sort of blows your mind a little bit. So, you know, some of the stats around like 50% of customers last year didn't even consult anybody at all, just went and did it themselves. So the customers in the research just went and did it themselves. But then when you take the next layer down, you know, in terms of brokers, actually a lot of the customers were saying that they were prompting the conversations with the brokers themselves. I think that was around 23%, where the actual customer is sitting there saying, hello, talk to me about protection. So in a market where it's been really challenging to sort of grow small businesses, mortgage market's been incredibly challenging. Actually, for a lot of advisors, there's that protection opportunity that's just sitting there and they're maybe not seeing it. And I think where the Viewpoint sort of really brings that to life is highlighting it with the tangible facts, where it kind of is a bit of an eye-opener for firms. And then, of course, when you take that up to network level, that helps them to shape the sales process, identifying any training or development needs within their own population. And then collectively, it feels that it can make a real change, which ultimately we all want to get more customers protected and create better outcomes. So I think the research is really critical and really, really useful. Yeah. And for actually a period of time, not just for that little launch period where we do a lot of activity.
And we still go back to that research. We can still go back to that research today. So we could even pick that up right now and there'd be pieces in that. And I think you're really right with that. I think, it's around 50% of people went online, the aggregators or direct to the insurers. Yeah. We're not saying that's wrong. But, ideally we're here, I would say we're here to champion advice, and actually we'd want, the bulk of those customers to go and see an advisor to make sure actually they are picking the product that's right for them and meets their needs. I think the stat underneath that really stood out to me was actually 22% of customers thought they had spoken to somebody so forth they'd received advice.
Yeah.
So even if they've gone direct to the insurer and they've picked up the phone and had a conversation, in their mind they'd received advice. And I think, that's really quite outstanding for me and actually quite concerning in a way that actually that's what a customer deems as advice. So I think there's a real importance for us to make sure that advisors are out there having those conversations. To Vikki's point, customers are, the piece there around customers are initiating the conversation. That's great because it shows that actually customers are starting to see, the benefit, and they're actually starting to recognise their own needs. But actually, let's get ahead of that. Let's get ahead of that, and actually, let's make sure we're starting those conversations.
It's quite scary, isn't it, to think that a quick phone call or a quick, even 5-minute chat to up a policy a customer would deem as, I got advice from them, probably just because they've answered a couple of factual questions rather than
that's exactly it. Yeah,
that's an interesting point that our industry has always wrestled with, isn't it? About what's advice, what guidance, particularly in the wealth space, and we're looking at it from both from a regulatory point of view, but also customer. Like you say, it can be just a short interaction like that where they're free to. They come off it thinking, I feel better now, so therefore I'm linking that to, I've had advice.
Yeah.
I've had my questions answered, so forth they've given me advice.
But has it really been advice? But then we've got to be really cognizant of how the customer's feeling and why they're doing that, in order so we can get inside their psyche and ensure that we as an industry are doing what's right.
Totally.
Sorry, God.
No. One of the things that I always think about in the protection advice conversation is it is definitely the most detailed and the most amount of privileged information that you're ever going to get as an advisor. So naturally in wealth and mortgages, you talk about finances, you have difficult conversations about bank accounts, savings, partner to partner financials, and that's challenging. But when you overlay protection on and you overlay that really sensitive medical information and that real depth of where the advisors get to even before they've even started to do the research and make the recommendation, it's a really privileged role to be in that actually makes a significant difference and builds a lot. You have to build a lot of confidence with the customer to get to that point. So to your point then, when we're sort of like doing this paradoxical thing where we think a customer's answered 2 factual questions and then we think about that real detailed confidential conversation that we recognise as advice, it just feels like so far removed, doesn't it? And there's definitely this customer education piece in terms of what that actually means to be fully advised. So important.
I totally agree. And I think you overlay also, we saw some research come out from the FCA on Friday around vulnerability.
Yeah.
And actually customers feeling quite uncomfortable with having those conversations. I think that came through in the last set of research as well, around just customers being slightly uncomfortable walking through the process. Yeah. So again, you do start to worry if they're not going for a fully advised process, they've got somebody that's wrapping their arms around them and saying, I'll help you, I'll guide you, I'll support you. And we'll get through the uncomfortable questions together. Because let's be honest, it's protection, it's medical, it's medical information. Some of it is uncomfortable. But it's getting to the right outcome. It's getting a product that meets your needs. Actually, are they stepping away from some of that and potentially not getting the right products because they're going direct and not wanting to set into the uncomfortable? Nobody wants to sit in there, in an uncomfortable place, are they? So I think that's really important. I think that doesn't pick up the vulnerability piece. And I think if only 4 in 10 customers actually step forward and said that they'd address their own vulnerability or mentioned vulnerability characteristics. That's a massive gap.
Yes,
I think as well, though, especially like reflecting back on kind of my time in advice, and even just my sister's just bought her first property as a first-time buyer, and you're too scared to be vulnerable, I guess, because you think, if I raise any sort of vulnerability, illness, anything at all, what if they decline my mortgage? Or what if I'm not going to get that ahead?
So
and
true.
It's such an uncertain time, isn't it? And it is giving those, any customer.
You're so worried about getting that first property, aren't you?
Yeah,
you'd do anything to get it, wouldn't you?
You're not there to have a mortgage. You're not there to get protection. You're there because you want that house.
Exactly.
You want your dream house. You want to be a house here, buying the stuff and putting it in. The mortgage is just a stepping stone towards that. And you're right, you just don't want to jeopardize it. And I think I often talk about advice and I go, you're not just an advisor, you're a counsellor, you're a marriage guidance, you're a home movie expert, you're a negotiator between the estate agent and the conveyancer. Like, there's so many facets to the role when you're in that kind of transaction, and never more so than with first-time buyers, which arguably are vulnerable. Because they're not educated.
I think anyone that's we're talking about the previous episode around the stress of moving, and when you're buying that first property, it's the unknown. People have not done it for a long time, so they're not sure what they've got to go through, whether it's searches, liaisons with the solicitors, all that type of thing. It's the unknown, it's change. People don't like it, they get stressed, don't they? So if you're a first-time buyer as well, the importance of that advisor to put an arm around them, really get to know them, occupy all those different pseudo roles that you've just described, because that's exactly what a mortgage and protection advisor does, isn't it? They've got so many different hats. That is massive. And to have the AMI as an entity that champions that and shows that and moves that forward, and it almost feels like it's subject matter that we can bring out going forward via AMI. That those multiple hats of an advisor for customers is absolutely massive.
I think as well, like, that's not even taking into account any of the market changes. So even as a customer, you've got not only your own financial changes, financial vulnerabilities, and health changes. I think it's quite funny, we said in a previous episode as well, sometimes you as the advisor knows more than the couple know about each other sitting in front of you. By the time they've looked at the individual bank statements, individual medical history that they've not shared with each other.
That's so true.
That's really interesting bit, isn't it? And I always used to quite enjoy that as an advisor. But that, that's before you even think about, we've got cost of living crisis, we've got rates at not all time high, but a lot higher than they were for a lot of people. So how do you expect advisors to navigate that, and where can Amy help with some of these issues going on at the moment?
I think, look, we are still navigating through. So I think, the market is still turbulent. I think it feels more optimistic than it has to. If you look at stats from Rightmove, I was looking this morning and, buyer demand is up, sales agreed are up. And actually we've got this, people are talking about, we have this stamp duty cliff edge because we're running very, very fast at the end of March, and the first time buyer stamp duty coming to an end. And, advisors are pinnacle to that. I mean, to your point there, just making sure that all of that goes through. Nobody wants a customer to fall out of that, a first time buyer to fall out of that process. But we're not expecting to see a cliff edge. You'll see completions drop down in Q2. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is there's some optimism in activity to keep that going. The other thing that we've seen is actually a lean back towards remortgages. So last year was very product transfer heavy, a significant product maturity year. And actually this year's even higher. I think it's about 380 billion, which I don't know what that equates to in customers, about 1.8, 1.9 million customers.
And the surge is, the massive surge is June, isn't it?
Yes.
So advisors will be looking at those now. Yeah.
And what are we thinking, why has that change come about for this particular year, do you think?
It's people rolling off the 5 years.
It's just rolling off the 5 years, it's as simple as that.
And it's this is the last group of people that's going to have the big payment shock, really. So we've still got people on 0.99 rates that will be rolling off.
And one
June.
of those in April.
Oh, Hazel.
Well, thankfully, only one part of the mortgage. But
it's looking better than it was.
Exactly.
So
definitely.
I held off. I was like, I'm going to wait and see.
And from a PT perspective, then, do you think advisors have just been more proactive in contacting customers earlier in terms of why we've seen a resurgence in the remortgage activity?
Yes. So I think there's a couple of pieces playing through. So I think what we had in the last couple of years is you had a whole host of things, and Vikki will know this from, I suppose we put our previous hats on slightly here as well. A whole host of things playing through. So you had rates changing really, really, really quickly, which actually meant if you do a product transfer, you secure the rate really quick, secure the rate quickly for that customer. Actually, when rates were going up quite considerably sometimes. There's also a piece around affordability and underwriting and just certainty of decision. And actually doing that product transfer was the right thing to do. Also, there are some customers who just couldn't afford to move away, and even on a pound for pound basis. So actually a product transfer was the right solution for them. And when rates are there and thereabouts, so a product transfer rate is the same as a remortgage rate, actually, it potentially is the right thing to do for your customer to do that product transfer. What I think we're seeing now is actually the market is easing slightly. Rates are starting to come back down. Affordabilities, I'm not saying things are easier. I think it's, just there's a little bit of flexibility in there. So I think you start to put all of that together, and actually we're seeing some of the banks, and we would definitely champion this, some of the banks being quite competitive with their remortgage rates. Yeah. So again, you start to then, just get a little bit more remortgage activity back in the market, and we're seeing that up about 30%. So the really good positive piece there for advice. So it's positive for the advisors. There's a financial piece in here. Let's not get too much into proc fees on product transfers and versus remortgages, but there's also for a protection perspective. So one of the things that we hear from advisors all the time is when it's a product transfer, it's very transactional. You might not even speak to the client very much. It might be done via sort of non-face-to-face or sort of email communication. You get into a remortgage, you get into a wider conversation, and actually then that becomes more holistic, and you start to talk about needs, you start to talk about what's their longer term plans, and you start to have a protection conversation. So I think actually what we'll start to see, we're already starting to see this, and actually the protection market is, we're hearing the protection market is up. Yeah, hopefully Vikki will agree.
No, it is definitely.
So I think all of those things start to play through. So there's definitely some optimism, and I definitely think the market's a little bit more buoyant than it was.
Yeah,
I'll talk about Amy in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, and I think advisors are naturally thinking a bit more broadly. So as sort of like the pressure's off with the market and it's less of that reactive situation, advisors are definitely being more proactive with those customer conversations. So the remortgage conversation does lend itself to that, but also I think there's more consideration of, let me go and have a look at my existing customers again, let me reevaluate. Definitely a bit of a trend for further advances in terms of home improvements rather than moving, because stock still remains quite low. So there's definitely this continuing
There's a lot on
trend.
the market, isn't it? But it's not necessarily moving so quick,
so I think,
particularly high up
so I think there's still like home improvements, which lends itself to further advance, which lends itself to, do you think you need a bit more protection, etc. So I think it just feels like a slightly different market. And I think it's still tough out there for advisors to navigate pricing and rates. There's still a bit of choppiness in terms of lenders pulling, but it's definitely nowhere near where it has been. But still a bit uncertain. I mean, swaps are still a little bit up and down, aren't they? Still a bit volatile at the moment. So I think advisors are still looking to have those customer conversations in advance and make sure that customers are forearmed and forewarned. But yeah, it's definitely better.
It's just so refreshing to have some positivity, isn't it? Because there are so many media headlines. There's so many, it doesn't matter which avenue you go down, whether it's on TikTok, social media, or actually our newspapers. There is so much at the moment about oh, don't move, rates are high, there's going to be all these struggles going on. I think it's just really refreshing. So someone like yourself, Steph, who can actually share some positive news for mortgage advisors. And actually for me, it's the importance of relaying that and giving confidence to the end clients, isn't
Yeah,
it?
It is. That confidence is huge. And just on the back of that, probably just worth talking about some of the things that you are working on, that you're involved in at the moment, Steph, if that's okay. If you're about to elaborate on those, that would be
Yeah,
great.
definitely. And I think just to pick up on the positivity, I'm a glass half full girl.
I thought so.
So, and I think, it has been really, really challenging. So I think it is about time that we start to look forward. There are still some challenges on the horizon, and touching to some of the things that we're working on. There definitely are still some challenges on the horizon. And the regulator is, definitely going to look at how do we continue to improve this market? How do we continue to implement consumer duty into our businesses? But you're right, we do need some positive headlines. And every time bank base rate, who knew that actually, that would be a headline? Bank of England base rate decisions would be headlines on, Good Morning Britain once every sort of 6 weeks. That was never the case. And all of a sudden it is. And, Labour government, whether you believe we will or we won't build 1.5 million houses, there will be activity off the back of the houses that we do build. And, that again is a positive headline for customers to see that actually new stock's come into the marketplace. So I think there's definitely, more in the national media now than there was, but we could do with some more. Without a doubt, we could do some more. This market is not dead, and it's a fantastic sector. And it's really, really important to the growth of the economy moving forward. Property's never been more important. But touching into what are we working on? So if I touch into regulation, and then I'll touch a little bit into some of the initiatives. We saw on Friday the regulator come out with their mortgage rule review. Again, very sort of light at the moment on detail, but we're seeing sort of that in a number of parts. So they've done a piece around just reminding lenders of what's already available there from an affordability stress test perspective. That's a sort of a gentle reminder. And then we'll move into some simplification pieces in May around sort of remortgaging and term existing. Again, we don't have much detail at the moment, but this is what we're hearing. And then into June, which is a public discussion on simplification, affordability, innovation. So could that be, and again, I'm just sort of floating, could that be looking at, there's a lender out there who operates with rental payments. So what's your rental payment? Are you affording to pay that rental payment? Well, if you're affording to pay that amount in rent, could you afford to pay, that's a lower amount in a mortgage. Actually, mortgage payments are probably lower, quite often lower than rental payments. Has that been a good concept? And I think that lender has really tried and tested that concept. But could we take that further? Could we help more first-time buyers onto the property ladder? So I think that sort of that public discussion will get into more of the detail on that.
Example of that thought leadership piece that Vikki was mentioning for the industry. Yeah, great. It'd be exciting to see where that could go.
Without a doubt, and I think it's good that the regulator is coming out to the marketplace and wanting to have those conversations and wanting to look at what more things can be done, and has the pendulum perhaps swung a little bit too far from a risk perspective that, we don't need to swing back to where we were. We're not going to go back to pre sort of 2008, but actually there probably is a happy medium within the safe space for the right customers, the right thing to do. So some innovation is definitely needed. So it's good that the regulator wants to have those conversations. Definitely. And then from an Amy perspective, we'll continue to run with some of the initiatives we're working on. So a massive thank you to L&G for being a supporter of our protection viewpoint for the last 5 years. We're just starting to look at what does the 2025 protection viewpoint look like. So that's my first viewpoint. So I'm really excited about that. So watch this space for more to come. And then we have 2 fantastic initiatives running at the moment, which one of is working in mortgages. So that's all around how do we attract new diverse talent to this sector. I think, I talked right at the very beginning about falling into financial services. We shouldn't have people falling into financial services. We should have people wanting to join financial services and see this as a career path. So how do we help people even know that this sector exists? I didn't know this sector exists. How do we help people know that these roles in this sector exist? And then also for the people who are already in this sector, how do we help them, develop their own career paths? How do we make sure we make that a safe space? How do we give them all the tools that they need? So that's a fantastic initiative in collaboration with IMLA as well.
One of the episodes we actually filmed this morning was a lady called Charlie, who's a mortgage broker, and she spoke about exactly that actually there's been twice in her career where she almost walked away from being a mortgage broker, even though she loved it, just to try and meet family work-life balances. So she actually talked about how the resilience she showed. I mean, she's still doing it. You know, she didn't walk away, thankfully, but it's definitely, there's so many options out there, aren't there? And it's about just all coming together and being a bit of a community, talking about it and supporting each other. Isn't it?
I think the working in mortgages scheme has been hugely successful. But actually, I'm sort of sitting here thinking, but it is very much lender focused. And actually, for anyone listening to this who sits in the protection or the wealth market, it is open to all.
It's very much open to all.
Mentor-mentee scheme. I mean, I'm currently mentoring 2 people. I have had 4 at one point, but I have had to slim it down to 2. And I find it incredibly valuable to mentor people. And my mentees have got something out of it as well. But it's definitely opening doors for people, creating a bit of that distribution, lender, cross-pollination, shall we say, where people are sort of transgressing between the 2 different parts of the market. And actually this awareness piece on young people coming through is massive, isn't it? Because I also fell into financial services. And then when I came for an interview at PTFS at the time, the recruiter said, do you want to go for an interview at a mortgage network? I said, I don't know what that is, but I've been made redundant, so I'll go to the interview. And that's how I ended up in the network space. But your story, my story, you know,
the same.
None of us sat with the careers advisor and said, hey, mortgages, great. Financial advice, yay. So I think that the Working in Mortgages initiative is really important. And I think if anyone would take anything away from today, it'd be like, no matter what part of the market, have a look at the website. It's brilliant. And so good.
To your point about over 300 people going through that mentor-mentee scheme. And you're right, actually, as a mentor, you get so much value out of that as well, just, you know, in addition to the mentee. So, yeah, but it's not just because the title says Working in Mortgages, very much not just focused on mortgages, but yeah, Vicki's right, across the sector. And I think, you know, I didn't know what a mortgage network was, who did back then, but also just the variety of roles that are available. And okay, we're not, okay, my piece about medicine, we're not doctors, but we are helping people, you know, home ownership goals, helping protect their income if they come sick. These are really important things for people. And, you know, you're right. Nobody ever came into me as an advisor and said, can I borrow 200 grand? They came in and said, I want to buy this house. And I want to buy this house because we're starting a family, or we're doing this, or we're, you know, there's always a story. I used to love the stories. I'm nosy. There's always a story. There's always something. And, I, you know, sometimes people would make me cry as well because I'm a bit softy like that. But do you know what I mean? There's always something behind it. So I think that's really important. The other initiative that we're working with, and I've got many others in my plans to look at, is our Green Mortgage Advice Initiative. So that's very much looking at, you know, climate change and what, again, unintended consequences, and how do we reach sort of net zero and the net zero targets. So, look, we recognise that, you know, that the property sector is a small part of that, but actually carbon emissions from property is around, depending on the report you read, about 25% of carbon emissions come from our homes. So actually we play a significant part. And actually advisors are, you know, that conduit between lenders and insurers and their customers. So actually they'll play a real pinnacle part in that. So just a very much focus on advisor education.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. It sounds like an exciting place to be. It's interesting, the green piece, isn't it? And the environmental side of it, because in the wealth space, customers have become very cognizant of firms links and fund links, I suppose, in that regard. Do you think that's coming out more to the fore from a mortgage and lending perspective, and will do so going forward as throughout society people become more aware of that?
I think so. However, I bought a house a couple of years ago, and, you know, back to your point about first time buyers, actually I hadn't bought. We lived in our previous home about 15 years, so all of a sudden I learned a lot going back through the process again that I probably should have known really. Very much about conveyancing being paper based. I mean, I think it was one of the things I know. I was surprised how much paper there was. But I thought, again, I was going around and asking questions around, you know, again, because I work in this sector, what's the EPC rating on this property? And some of the estate agents were saying, I don't know, nobody ever asked that question. You know, nobody ever asks the age of the boiler. They don't ask, you know, how the loft's insulated or when was the double glazing changed, etc. Actually, what they're focused on is the Christmas tree is going to go there. The broadband's good and it's around the corner from a good school. So actually, I don't think some of the pieces around green and climate and, you know, energy efficiency of a property is actually sort of ticked up the list as much as it could do. But I do think the more education we get out there, and we need government to lead on some of that as well. We need government to lead on quite a lot of it, actually. But as I think it will come more to the fore, and I think advisors can play a really key part in building their own knowledge and then educating their customers.
It's definitely something, in Scotland we're slightly different. We got home reports before any property goes in the market, so we can see if we want the EPC rating, etc., etc. But again, when I was advising, the amount of people who would come in to see me and I'd say, have you seen the home report? What's the home report? Oh, I've not asked for it yet. I've gone to view it, fallen in love with it. I'm now sat in front of you to get the property. And you'd be thinking, you definitely want to read that home report before you be buying it. But yeah, it's consumers don't get it either. And that's where absolutely as advisors, we can influence that massively, can't we? Because we're the ones that are usually the first people they ever speak to about these types of things.
There's a few firms out there in the market that are making this their niche, their absolute USP. Because to Steph's point, I agree, it's still a small amount of customers, but those customers are adamant on their requirements for property and also how they want to transact with an advisor. They don't want paperwork. They want everything digital. They want to think about their carbon footprint throughout the transaction. And there's a handful of firms that are really taking the lead on that are really interesting in terms of their proposition to customers. And I think it is interesting, the wealth space, to your point, Wayne, in terms of how that's already been on a journey and how that feels like a standardised question now. And actually, I think we could see the mortgage advice space growing quite quickly, particularly if we get the calls to government that Amy have sort of picked up on. Because fundamentally, we're not going to get that shift in change without that, are we?
And you just think of the schools as well. When kids are going through primary school at the moment, the environment is absolutely huge. So when they come to be able to transact, being over 18, is that going to be higher in their decision-making process, as you said?
So.
Yeah,
whether it be lender, whether it be advisor, whatever.
There's so much more, children so much more acutely aware now of environmental issues, what feels right and what feels wrong in that area. And
it's the feeling, right? That's how they're judging it, aren't they? Does this feel right or not?
And that's similar to what we're talking about with the housing transaction, isn't it? It's that it's an emotional purchase. It's a feeling. And if that's something that you believe in, that you're passionate about, you want that process to follow through how you're feeling. And I think it's really smart of these firms that have taken the lead on it, that are driving their own proposition. We just need the rest of the market to follow. So
it's
do indeed,
It's like one of my friends, and I won't share where, but they looked at a new build property recently, just outside of London, and they were so excited about it, put the offer in, etc. And then when they actually went to the mortgage broker with this property, the mortgage broker's like, well, I'm so limited on what lenders I can pick for you because this is too eco. And actually a lot of the lenders were saying, no, we won't lend on that, because actually there were so many green initiatives in this new build home that it limited them too much. So in the end, they pulled out because they said, well, that's going to be hard to resell in the future potentially. So there's definitely mismatch, isn't there, of how things are going at the moment.
And maybe that's just, the embryonic stages of where we're going in that regard. That things are going to catch up with each other.
It does feel like that. I mean, the work that you've done in Amy on the green stuff has definitely driven that base level education, understanding, and a list of calls and requests on government and lenders, most importantly as well, to Hazel's point on the lack of product availability and criteria, really pushing through on that. So I think that's been really good. And now it's about how that change actually comes to fruition, isn't it?
It is. And to your point, it is very much the early stages. And I any lender that steps forward and any, customer who steps forward is a step in the right direction. So this is a journey. However, what I would say is it's a journey. The end destination is very clear. So I think we all know where we need to get to. So I think that's one of the differences with this, is how we get there. And it's going to be a bit bumpy. And, we're going to make some, even as a sector, we'll make some, things that perhaps don't quite work. And I think you just need to address that. And if it fails, it fails fast. Pivot, move on. So I think we just need to, recognise that any step forward is a step forward. But yeah, you're right. There are, and there are a lot of challenges, and there's lots of challenges with green that we can't solve ourselves either as a sector. So actually, what's the right technology? What's the right thing to do? Are there going to be grants available? And I think there's a lot of confusion out there. So, but Amy and advisors and this sector can't solve that. No. But what we can do is come back to, what's available today. What education can we give? How do we, how do we help advisors feel comfortable with the conversations they're having with their
The fact
customers?
is, you're there. You're that voice. You're constantly there, and promoting either what's available or championing what isn't available and what can come in the future. That relentless piece that you're supporting the advisor and promoting the advisor.
Just bringing the right minds together as well. Get the right people in a room to have a conversation around what is the art of the possible.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a conversation about what's the art of the possible, you'll never, you won't create, you won't innovate, and you won't develop. So yeah.
We've had recent conversations even in L&G, haven't we, about actually sometimes you'll be doing something for so many years that you think, well, this is just how it's done. And then it's actually asking that extra question, well, why? What was that decision? What was the environment at the time when that decision was made? And is it still fit for purpose? Is it still right? So definitely we're on that journey as well, aren't we, as a business, of actually how do we constantly be challenging the norm and making sure that we're constantly improving that journey, just from all angles, from a commercial point of view, but also a end customer point of view, most importantly.
Yeah.
We don't always see a huge amount of innovation in mortgages. People will say there is. I don't think there's been a huge amount. I think some of the stuff I've called out around sort of the buy-to-let products, things like the buy-to-let rental product that we saw from that lender.
I think a game changer, actually. Really
fantastic.
That's
different
a
innovation.
Real push forward.
But
that's
really,
about it.
We don't really see an awful lot, though. People's call that out. I don't think we see an awful lot.
No.
This is a space where we could actually really see some innovation.
Disruptor
do something different.
Could come in from nowhere, couldn't it? That you may have some intuition where you might think there'd be a gap, or something could just come that we haven't seen, and wow, we didn't realise that could be done, or that's a completely different way of looking at it. We shall see.
Yeah, and also a bit of a leg up for house building in itself, and this chronic shortage of stock that we've got and government targets. Actually, some of the green properties can be built much quicker, much smarter, more economically. That actually brings, solves the green challenge, but also solves some of our house building challenges that we've got as well, which is really, really important to sort of get everything moving and to sort of, start. We won't get into the crisis in our housing market, but I think it's really important that green is not just about people that are passionate about the environment, but it brings about other benefits as well that are really astute for all of us to think about across the market that could really make a difference.
And the figures that you see, to your point around what that brings for economic growth, and you think about, if you've got children today, coming up through school, what are the trades of the future? What are we going to need going forward? And we're going to need people who can install solar panels. We're going to need people who can install the next wave of whatever heating efficiency systems are available. That's what we're going to need. That's what's going to change. The market's going to change the planet, and it's going to help. Those people have trades and push economic growth. So I think that's really important message to get across.
It's even like most of the new builds you look at now will have a charging point for cars and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And even go back 2 years ago, you wouldn't have really seen that.
No.
So it
That's
is
moved
amazing
quickly,
how
hasn't
much
it?
it changes.
Wasn't there some right move research about that being in the top 3 requests
searches,
now of
yeah.
searches? I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? About how that's really changed. You would never have searched for that 5 years ago, would you?
You've never even
No.
thought about
You
it.
wouldn't.
5 years, would you?
It just wouldn't even be in
No.
your psyche, would it?
No.
But these are affordable things you can do. Charging, affordable within reason. I know that it's expensive, but you can, they are affordable. And through some schemes, even sort of part of the scheme and part of what's available to put into your home. But some of the smaller things you can do that are sort of can make changes to your property, can make changes to your fuel bills. Insulation. Smart heating systems. I love the fact that I can put my heating on as I'm driving, not while I'm driving, before I get in the car.
Before you drive.
Not while I'm driving.
Caveat in.
Quick caveat. But as I'm about to head home, I can pop the heating on at home. So those type of systems are, they're really important. And they are, cost effective to do and make a benefit. So how do we just raise awareness of those types of things as well? Little things that people can do today.
I think
So
it's
many
fair to say, Steph, your first 3 weeks, you must have so many tabs open in your brain from all these initiatives. It's absolutely brilliant. And I'm just thinking with an advisor listening at the moment, what would be your ask them, or where can they get involved with Amy? If maybe this is the first time they've really understood fully all the initiatives you have going on, what would you say to them?
So you're right. I do have a lot going on in my mind, even to the space, Vikki, where I have no time for any Disney planning. How shocking is
Oh
it?
my God.
I couldn't even fit a holiday planning into that at the moment.
There's a whole other hour of a podcast about our love of Disney.
There is indeed, yes. There without a doubt. So I have no space for that whatsoever, which is really good because I'm completely focused. So I think there's a couple of things. There's an ask for me actually out to members around, if you have feedback, I want to hear it. What more can we do for you? What's keeping you awake at night? What's helping your business grow? It's not all about challenges, but what's helping your business grow? What can Amy do to support that? Or actually, what help do you need from elsewhere in the marketplace that Amy can help facilitate? So there's a definite ask for me, and I truly mean that. My email's on the website. Please contact me. In addition to that, I think if you want to get involved, please do. These initiatives are open, and actually we need more advisor voices. We recognise actually they're really, advisors are really busy. You're running fantastic businesses, facing into all those challenges and everything we've touched on. But if you want to get involved, please do. And thirdly, if you're not a member, after hearing all of this, why are you not a member? So please get in touch because you should be. And we really want to help sort of drive this sector forward. And I'm really, hopefully it comes across. I'm really passionate around what does the future hold for mortgage and protection advice. And I think the future's only bright.
Yeah, and I'd say not only passionate, but extremely understanding and empathetic, because it sounds that obviously you've been through a lot of these journeys and you actually lived in the shoes of some of these advisors as well. So I think that's really credible and something that I think most people really, really value in the industry. And thank you so much, Steph. That's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you for
and
having me.
Thank you, Vikki.
Thank you, Vikki.
Amazing stuff.